The Department of Education getting a dose of DOGE-Zempic. The agency slimming down its workforce by half, giving 1,300 career employees the boot. Trump's handing the chalk back to the states.
We have a dream, and you know what the dream is? We're going to move the Department of Education. We're going to move education into the states so that the states, instead of bureaucrats working in Washington, so that the states can run education, where the parents of the children will be running education, where governors that are doing a very good job will be running education.
But Democrats are crying foul as they watch their beloved cash cow for union jobs get butchered. The one that squandered $1 trillion and left a trail of kids with nothing but crummy test scores. Of course, the teachers' union boss is furious.
The federal government does not control education. The states do. Local school boards do. This is about opportunity. That is why so many people are so mad about it, because they're just taking opportunity away from kids that don't have it. So billionaires, kids of billionaires, they have it. They go to private schools. Everyone else, 90%, go to public schools. Don't take away their opportunity.
So let's stay on the facts.
Sorry.
No,
I'm really angry about this.
No, because this
I'm
is
really angry.
All right, Judge, how at this point can you defend the state of public education in America?
The progression has been downward since we got to the point where the federal government got involved. And make no mistake, the Constitution does not grant the federal government authority over the schools. And the 10th Amendment also says specifically that powers not delegated to the federal government, as in education, is up to the states. All right, so let's get that legal piece out of the way. Then what you do is you say, kids are getting worse every year. 39% of fourth graders are not proficient in math, 31% not proficient in reading. Eighth grade, 28% can't do math. I mean, this is great, or can do math. So in the end, they're going to argue that this isn't fair to the kids. This money does not go to teachers. This is about grants and programs and monitoring those grants and sending money out to their favorite educational project. And it's got nothing to do. And for this woman to fight for students, the woman who had the opportunity to open schools when they got billions to COVID-proof our schools and couldn't find one metric, one reason to open the schools. And now she's got the unmitigated goal to say, oh, our students, you could care less. Go back to Ukraine and do whatever you do in Ukraine, Randy.
Dana, have you heard an idea from Randy besides spend more money? Any idea at all to improve scores?
Well, no. And the other thing is, I don't hear them concerned about it.
No.
Like they're concerned about the Department of Education being cut, but as we've pointed out, and they've started to point out, they're like, but wait, local governments already do that. Okay, well then fine. Then what's happening at the Department of Education? Why doesn't anybody care? There are some things that they do, and Linda McMahon, the secretary, said would continue. For example, it's possible you could take the Pell Grant program, which a lot of people like, and say that helps lower income students go to college. So why isn't that at the Treasury Department? Like you can take the student loan program, which has got problems. You could take that over to the Treasury or the Commerce Department. Like there are things that can be done to deal with that. They also are complaining that it's the the Education Department that defends disabled students. You could do that at the Justice Department. So all of those things are possible. Our public school system used to be the envy of the world, and now we are a laughingstock in the world. And President Trump is saying we can't allow that. I'm going to add one other statistics that you guys might not have seen. Jason Riley today in the Wall Street Journal reports that since COVID, well, before COVID, chronic absenteeism, which means missing 10% or more of school, was at like 28%. Now it's at 34%. So over a third of the students in New York don't go to school 10% or more. And you think that your kids aren't going to pay for that for the rest of their lives? Absolutely, we all will. But I would say if the Democrats really want to save the Department of Education, don't put Randy on TV. Take her on. Go after them and say, you are not doing what is the fundamental right of every person in this country, which is to get the education that they deserve. Why do you think people are pouring across the border with their kids? Because they get the constitutional right to be educated here. But even that is not going to be good enough for the fate that awaits us if we don't change.
If they did take on Randy and the unions, they might not get donations, though. Maybe that's what they're afraid of.
Who is Randy?
Weingarten.
Where?
Lady.
Oh, I thought that was a fat Gary Shandling. R.I.P. Gary's not really alive. It goes back to just politics in general. How much real estate does politics take up in your life? It should only be like one room in your giant house of stuff. But the Dems have injected politics in every single room in your house of life, including education. You're supposed to be able to make the decisions and protect your kids from stuff in school. Instead, they said no school choice. You can choose your abortion, but you can't choose your own school. You can't do anything about your kids if they're being, groomed by perverted teachers. If you go to a school board meeting, they'll come after you. This is why DOGE works, because it has none of these phony tropes. It's presented as is. Here's the program, here's the cost, here's what it does, here's what it doesn't do. It's impossible to protest unless, of course, the protesters are paid. Harold. But we can spot it now. You can't trick us anymore. You can't take our money and not give us something in return. So I think Americans like this stuff because they respond to clarity. And the Democrats are having a problem because they've never had to sound out their ideas, because the media never expected that from them. So they just agreed with them. So what you're seeing and what you saw this woman melt down is their ability to provide any coherent defense has atrophied. And that's what you saw right there, a screaming Mimi.
Well, usually you'll be able to point to results and say,
Yes.
well, we did this, we did this.
Right,
But
right.
they
Yeah.
can't even do that. Harold, do you still really want to quadruple the size of the Department of Education?
I do, and I'll tell you why.
Oh, boy.
So hear me out, because you all have said a bunch of things, and there's a lot of passion behind what you're saying, but a lot of it's just not true.
Here comes the but.
So let me give you a sense, give you a guess. What percentage of money do you believe in our public school system, on average, in every state, is spent by the federal government, Judge? What percent of the? So I'll give you 7.8% in public education, K through 12, comes from the federal government. The state, on average, is 46.8. Local governments are 45.3. Local and state governments establish academic goals in schools. They adopt and approve budgets. They approve expenditures. They set the school calendar. They hire and supervise the superintendent. And they approve hiring of all personnel, including teachers.
So then why do we need a Department of Education?
Because what the 7.8% does, Judge, some of it's higher ed stuff, and some of it is feeding poor kids lunch.
That's
Let me
good.
finish. You asked that-
No.
me finish.
That comes from
You're
other
wrong.
bit-
You're wrong. Let me
that-
just finish my point. You're wrong. That comes from the Department of Agriculture, the breakfast. Lunch comes from there. They also help school districts deal with kids who have disabilities, mental and physical. I know these numbers are uncomfortable. I'm for what you are for, which is helping our schools get better. But what you're saying doesn't make any sense, because all the decisions are made at the local level. The reason I think the Fed should have more of a role, Greg, if I'm wrong, I'll be the first to say if we do it and the Fed screw it up, so be it. The reason all those things you talk about, Dana, so well when you had that person on DP last week, and I made the comment about Louisiana, their schools really suck, so their reading went up. That's great. But they were at such a low level. These decisions are being made at the local level. The money comes from the local level. The only point I make, you can differ with me and say the Feds may do a worse job, but I know this, the people in charge now, our students are getting a raw deal because of what we have set up right now. I'm not saying the federal government will do it much better, but I know this, they can't do it any worse than what we're doing right now. That's why I made the point I made last week.
It's interesting to me that we have the same goal,
Right.
and we have the complete opposite way of getting there. I actually appreciate your point of view. Like, it should be bigger. You could do more, and they deserve more. But then you could. I also see my point of view, which is it's not doing what it needs to be doing. So therefore, why not push it back the other way?
I think it should, but Dana, it already is that way. 94% of it is there.
Then we don't. If all of these other things can be done at other departments, then maybe this department's not
because
needed.
I believe Department of Treasury, we could divide their stuff up. We could divide the Department of Defense up. This is a national concern and challenge and purpose and function, I believe, much like defense is. So they have to have local partners to do it, but the federal government ought to be involved in making sure kids can read, whether they live in Louisiana, California, New York, Tennessee, Georgia, or New Jersey, wherever it may be.
Education flourished for most of our history without the Department of Education that you and I both know was created by Jimmy Carter to say thank you to the teachers' unions. Let's be straight about why that was.
In 1980,
we have a lot of tariffs to talk about.
Jesse,
okay?
in 1980, the Nation at Risk study came out. They had to have years of study before that to get the data.
Harold,
all I'm saying,
Harold,
and
a
it was local
two-word
too.
solution for all of this. child labor.
Got him.
You always nail it. And you always encapsulate it.